Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakaram Mayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Tai Mahatpriya Mahapura Vibhur Nirma Kshataya Damusha Purushabham Tegana Sadasa Sadasatmakaram Krishista Bhagavan Vacham Sime. Hare Krishna. So thank you everyone for coming, and we are very honored by the presence of so many senior Vaishnavas, Prabhupada disciples. And so with all of your blessings, I wanted to introduce a subject matter we've started discussing yesterday with Russian devotees. And I think this is something which is quite interesting and relevant. At least Russian devotees found it extremely relevant for themselves, as far as I understood from their enthusiasm. And this is something myself and a few other devotees in our movement have been thinking of for a long time, and basically that is the first purpose of ISKCON, which is, if you remember it, peace and unity in the world, Krishna consciousness for the entire human society, not just for a small section of it, which, as we all know, was the very strong desire of Srila Prabhupada, which we all want to fulfill. And one of the leaders in our movement, His Holiness Kavichandra Maharaj, shared a very interesting article with me, which we have read yesterday with the devotees. And basically that is very much in line with Bhagavad Gita. We read from the 4th chapter, 22nd verse, concerning the qualities of the devotees, Yadrija Lap Santushto, that devotee is unaffected by the dualities of the material world, and yet he is very determined in his service to the Supreme Lord, so that these are most prominent characteristics of the devotee, is that he is detached from personal gain or safety, but he is very much attached to serving the Lord. And so this article we have discussed is coming from one Christian leader in a church, and somehow he brought this up, and one of the devotees yesterday mentioned that most probably it was taken from professional sources, that 12 qualities of, or 12 we can say signs of successful entrepreneur. And so we don't know what is the source, but it's very interesting that he described that in a spiritual context, in a missionary context, that 12 signs of a spiritual entrepreneur. And we all recognize that all the 12 signs were very much prominent in Srila Prabhupada, and this Christian leader is saying that these are the kind of people which the mission requires for the success because there are plenty of shepherds and chaplains in a spiritual institution, but what's really missing is spiritual entrepreneurs. And so, just to introduce you to the subject briefly, and today we promised to discuss what's actually required to manifest these 12 signs. What's needed, what can be done, so that at least those of us who are interested could become those spiritual entrepreneurs. And the 12 signs big, right? We understand that Srila Prabhupada was always thinking big. We hear that he said this was my only. Yeah, Chutananda Prabhu can tell us.
In Vrindavan, before the Krishna Balaram temple was built, I spoke with Guru Das and I said, what if we put all of our money and energy and acquire Radha Damodar temple and have something small in Raman Reddy? He said, I don't know, let's ask Prabhupada. So we said, what if we engage everything and try to get Radha Damodar temple and develop that and have something small in Raman Reddy? Prabhupada said, I cannot think anything small. That is my disease. Even when I was working for Dr. Bosch laboratory, my plans were bigger than him. He could not keep up.
Thank you. Yes. So, second one is to believe that God can do anything, that God is almighty and there are no limits. And very interesting point which was brought up in that particular sign is that you can, spiritual entrepreneur can manifest God's power under one and very important condition, that the people around him or her would actually believe in him or her. And he gave an example of Jesus Christ, who could not actually manifest any miracles in his own hometown because the people were not believing in him. But once he went for his mission, he could, walk on the water and feed 5,000 people with 2 loaves of bread or something like that, because that community believed in him. And so we know Srila Prabhupada's example, very much prominent in that regard. In India, he was the same Srila Prabhupada before coming to the West. He couldn't do much despite of all his effort, because people were not taking him seriously. But when he came to the West, when he came to America, because his disciples, his followers were taking him very seriously, Srila Prabhupada could manifest all his spiritual powers. So that's really important sign, that to be surrounded by well-wishers. And so in that regard, I feel very inspired in Alachua, because I feel that I'm in the company of well-wishers. So thank you all very much for your inspiration. And the third one is seeing abundance instead of scarcity. Fourth one, having vision first and then thinking of resources later. Fifth one, investment into personal and team development. And I believe Srila Prabhupada was again the best example of investing in people, right? Maybe some of you could share some of the examples. Prabhupada disciples,
there was a shoe company, and they sent 2 salesmen to Africa. And then they came back with their report. And the one said, no, we won't sell anything. Nobody, they don't wear shoes in Africa. And the other salesman said, it's a gold mine. Nobody has any shoes. We'll make a fortune.
Anyone can give any senior Vaishnavas can give any example to us how Prabhupada was investing into his followers? Shesha Prabhu.
Well, Prabhupada started the GBC. He wanted the GBC to take responsibility. He was pushing from a fairly early stage, 1970, I think, pushing and investing in his leaders to take more and more responsibility. Of course, he was there to guide, and so that was part of the investment. You invest and you watch and they grow, and he wanted to do that right from the beginning, and so I think that's an example. Investing and giving real authority to the leaders as well.
Right. Okay. That's thank you. Yes, Chaturanga.
You know, from the excuse me, from the very beginning, all of the temples that were opened and the projects that were won, Prabhupada put, I mean, relatively young people, 22, 24-year-old individuals that really had no experience, except, as you mentioned, their faith in Srila Prabhupada, their faith that if Prabhupada wanted them to do it, it could be done. So, you know, he understood that to give them the ability, give them the position, and then through that development, through their faith in him, they'd be able to develop it.
Very good. Yes.
And of course, he traveled around the world like what, 8 times or something, just 14 times. You know, just to see the temples and to enliven the devotees, and he was always, you know, concerned about the devotees and their welfare, and he used to sign every letter, you know, your ever well wisher. So he was very concerned about the devotees.
Yeah. Yes.
About Michael, when he was building the Michael temple, he actually, even though he got some criticism, but he first built, before the temple, he built for the devotees place to stay and everything, so because he knew it would be difficult, so he invested in his devotees, their welfare before.
Wonderful. Yes. And also, Shrutakirti Prabhu always remembers how he was caring personally about him and his wife. He would actually give them money for their expenditures, etc., etc., looking after their child's welfare, etc. So he was extremely caring, always investing into his devotees. Yes.
And just one other thing I'll add on that point. At the meeting I was at last night after I left you, we were reading from June's book, and there was the mention of when Bhavananda took sannyas, and Prabhupada met Radhika the first time after that. And he explained to her, you know, she was not asking for anything, or she was actually feeling quite humble, and Prabhupada explained, you're now my responsibility. Your husband has taken sannyas, anything that you need, you come to me and I'll provide that for you. That was Prabhupada's mood to
Amazing.
take care of his disciples, as one keeps saying.
There's another that reminded me of New Vrindavan at an evening darshan. There was one Mataji, Gopal Lakshmi Kriya. She was just, you know, sitting there in her sari and was kind of cold. And Srila Prabhupada stopped the darshan and he said, "Are you okay?" And she was so shy, you know, she didn't say anything. And so the temple president said, you know, she's just happy to be in your presence, Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada said, no, you have to make sure you take care of the women. You have to, they said, they're too shy, they won't ask. So you have to make sure that at least once a month you ask them if they need anything, and make sure that you're taking care of them.
Thank you. Achyutananda.
There was a sannyasi in, in Australia, in Mother Teresa, and after years of service, though, but he got married, and Prabhupada got very concerned. Please, and there's a letter. Please don't leave us. Don't leave the movement. You can go on serving as householder, and please come here. And I'm still in Australia. Come here. If you cannot come here, stay in Los Angeles. I will come there to talk to you.
Thank you.
Ultimately, he came to Vrindavan.
Yeah, so investing in people, this is how it's happening, that caring after people around you, caring after your team, that's very clear example of Srila Prabhupada. Then point number 7 is very important. Ship first, improve later. And we know that Prabhupada literally shipped himself to America. And from there he started improving on things. And point number 8, to be fine with ambiguity. And of course, Srila Prabhupada absolutely had no idea what will happen. He was trying for the best, and of course, Krishna reciprocated, but there was no any guarantee, there was no certainty, so it was completely ambiguous what will come out of his effort. Point number 9, will risk everything without guarantee of success. And point number 10, never wait for consensus. That's a very interesting one, right? Again, Srila Prabhupada's example, in his own spiritual institution, he was trying very, very hard to, work with his god brothers. Didn't happen. So he just went alone, right? And continued serving his spiritual master. And so it says that if we all waiting for consensus, that we might wait forever, and it will never happen. If you know it's the right thing to do. Of course, acting alone is not recommended. Of course, Prabhupada had to do that, but it was exceptional case. But sometimes, you would have to start something with very few supporters or friends. But if you are convinced that you are doing the right thing, then others will join once they see that you succeeded. And we know that every single project in ISKCON, successful project, was happening like that, was starting small and then grew naturally. Point number 11, let the critics talk while you act. You act. Let people criticize, but you just carry on doing what you're supposed to be doing. And we know how important it is. And again, Srila Prabhupada's example. Was he criticized? Of course, he was criticized left, right, and center all the time. But he didn't care about it. Of course, it was not making him very happy. He was even making some remarks in his books about it. But it didn't stop him, all that criticism. So it's really important for us to not to be affected. And of course, the criticism in itself helps us to be humble, develop tolerance and dependence on Krishna, which is good. It's purifying. And of course, criticism is just contaminating ourselves. And point number 12 is very interesting. It is break rules. And it doesn't talk about breaking scriptural rules, but it talks about breaking human rules. And did Srila Prabhupada break rules? Anyone can give example of Srila Prabhupada breaking rules?
Yeah. Giving initiation to women.
Yeah.
Like it's forbidden in scriptures.
Yeah,
Giving
Brahminical
second
initiation to ladies. Any other rules he
Sannyas.
broke?
You cross the ocean.
Cross the ocean.
He gave lectures sannyas.
Yeah, gave him lectures sannyas, yes. So many rules he had to break, right? Because it's innovation.
16 rounds.
Yeah, 16 rounds. Well, 16 rounds was kind of accepted for preachers, but
Oh yeah? Before?
yeah, Brahmacharini ashram, that was unheard of, right? So many rules he had to break. But this is what's required. And if there are any reflections on those points, we can take some time to discuss. And then today, what we actually promised the devotees to introduce the four rules, we can say, or four principles which would enable any of us, those who are interested in that, to become a spiritual entrepreneur and develop and manifest those 12 signs. Yes, Shesha Prabhu.
Well, on these 12 points, there was one of these top business magazines. They did a survey of people who achieved success after 60 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Forbes.
Huh?
70.
After 70. Time magazine, whatever. It was one of these big magazines. And Prabhupada was listed there amongst the people as an example of someone who achieved success after a certain age in life. And of course that says a lot about him following these kind of 12 things, because even at 70 years old when he left to come, I mean,
Yeah.
at 70 years old, who goes out and does
That's
these
right.
things? You know, these 12 points could apply to someone 35 years old, probably 70.
Yeah.
But of course, you already had characteristics called adhikar.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not like
Yeah.
life in preparation. All that.
Yeah, it came up in CNN report. Actually, they analyzed 10 people in the 20th century who achieved tremendous success after 50, and Prabhupada was the oldest on the list. The oldest of 10 special people of the 20th century. Successful people. Anyone
I
else?
don't think any of those people were like religious persons either. I mean, they were like who achieved success in a religious or spiritual endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
And Prabhupada's probably the only one on that list
Yeah.
that's in that category.
Yeah. Well, they analyzed financially. So he was the oldest to achieve tremendous financial success at the end of his life, with a very late start. Yeah. So, anyone else? Any other reflections?
I was thinking Prabhupada was very revolutionary
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in all sense. He was just revolutionary.
Yeah.
His
That's
thoughts
the-
and his actions.
Yeah. Revolutionary entrepreneur. Revolutionary spiritual entrepreneur.
Actually, there's one morning walk in LA in '74. If anybody wants to, I don't know how you find it. I'm not good at that aspect, but it's called. If you have the lecture, it's called Vaishnav Heroes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on the morning walk in LA, and there's several GBCs there. It was just 74, because in '73 we did the Rath Yatra in London, but then they didn't want to let us do it anymore because it was too weird. Prabhupada wouldn't stop dancing. They just didn't. So Prabhupada was, I don't think you were there. Balamardhan is there, and some, Karanga or whatever. So it's really one of the topmost morning walks you could ever hear. So in that morning walk, he's telling them, take the cart, the Rath cart, to Trafalgar Square. It doesn't matter what they say. They're just rascals. They say it's a commonwealth, but it's not a commonwealth. They're not acting like they won't let us do it. We'll plead that this is like Hindu suppression. You're saying, and many of you were revolutionaries in your karma life, but now you don't want to do anything. He's really heavy. And then he says, they have not seen what a Vaishnava is. Then he said, like Arjuna or Ramchandra.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, otherwise, if you don't follow this instruction, then you'll simply sell the temple and smoke ganja. He mentioned the name, Gorsun, because Gorsun had recently done that.
Oh.
But it's very heavy, like pushing,
Yeah.
He said you were all political protesters. He used the word, I forget.
Mm-hmm.
Previously, now you're not doing anything. Like, you get out there and just do it anyway.
Wow, amazing.
That's one thing that comes across in Shamasundar's book, is that Prabhupada was always pushing him to do, pushing him to meet this person, meet that person. He was,
Trying anything.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was intense.
Yeah.
You think of Shamasundar as, a wild adventurer, but Prabhupada was like squeezing him, do this.
Mm-hmm.
He was feeling the pressure.
Yeah. And as we know, Srila Prabhupada's explicit instruction was that the devotees should be like him in spirit, of course not imitating him, but following in his footsteps. And there is one really interesting verse in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Lord Krishna is glorifying the trees of Vrindavan, because trees are the best examples of self-sacrifice for the sake of others. And he actually says that everyone should be following the examples of those trees. Etavach janma sobhalyam dihinam iha dehishu pranaya arthadiyavacha shriyan acharanam sada. And so he says that this is the perfection of life for anyone living in this world, is to dedicate oneself to the eternal welfare of all the living entities by using in this process one's prana, one's life, artha, one's wealth, thiya, intelligence, and vacha, words. And it's very interesting that these four, prana, artha, dhiya, vacha, they are perfectly corresponding to, for example, four varnas that say, and of course we understand that eternal welfare means devotional service, because nothing else gives eternal welfare, eternal benefit. And so Shudras, they don't have much qualification, they only have their lives they can dedicate in service, only prana. But Vaishyas have some wealth, artha, so they can dedicate that in service. And Kshatriyas have thiya, intelligence, that's why they can take serious responsibility, not only for themselves but for thousands and millions of people. And Brahmanas can speak vacha. And actually because Srila Prabhupada expected devotees to be Brahmanas in the society, and it's explained that Brahmana is the one who, having top qualification, naturally has all the lower aspects already covered. So it's really important for us to be engaged in the service on all the four levels. And it starts with prana, it starts with our life. And what does it mean? Because there are two categories of people. One who are actually living, and the other ones are existing, right? There is one German joke which says that he died at 25 and he was buried at 80, right? And unfortunately there are many people like that who spiritually died long time ago and they just existed till they were buried. So, and what's the difference between living and existing? And in devotional service, what does it make? What makes the difference? And it's very interesting that the very first thing mentioned in Nectar of Instruction, the very first, you can say, quality which nurtures one's devotion, one's bhakti, is utsaha, enthusiasm, inspiration. Because there are two things. We are either inspired or expired, right? And we have to choose what do we want to be. And so, in terms of serving Krishna, it's really important for us to be inspired. And how can we be inspired? Bhagavad Gita is explaining that Shriyan Swadharma Vigunant Paradharman Svanushtita, that it's better to follow the duties enjoined by one's own nature rather than trying to follow somebody else's duties, right? So it's really important to be ourselves in Krishna consciousness. And I think this is largely neglected instruction of Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, that for the sake of communal development, many times individual development is sacrificed or ignored, right? But this is my firm conviction, we're going to be as successful as the movement or the society as successful individual devotees are. Successful individual devotees create successful movements, successful society. And that's why it's really important to be focused on individual success before communal success, right? And so that's the first thing, to be yourself and meditate on what's actually inspiring me. What do I want to do for Krishna? Not for any results. Because if you act according to your nature, you don't care about the results. And that's the only option. That if it's really inspiring you, you don't mind even losing on that activity, right? You don't care. Because you cannot live any other way. Like Arjuna. He was the warrior, he was the archer. And he sacrificed even his sleep, as Mahabharata explains, for the sake of practicing, because he wanted to become the best archer on the planet. So he was really inspired. And he was fighting, he didn't care whether he was living or dying, because he was enjoying doing what he was born for. So that's really important, point number one. What's your calling? What's your inspiration? What is your enthusiasm? What would you want to do for Krishna? Not for any external results, but what can you put your heart into? Right? What is that activity? And if you really do something which inspires you, you can do it very well. That's the test. You can become the best in that. And next one is artha. And artha means wealth, and of course that comes from how much what we are offering is appreciated by other people, right? If we are doing something really well, it's going to be appreciated. And since we are in the house of Indradyumna and Gandharika, we cannot avoid thinking of this example, that she really likes art, right? You cannot stop her from painting. That's her life and soul. And she doesn't do that for money. She does that because she loves painting. This is her nature. But then because she puts her heart into it, it comes out so nice that people are ready to pay anything, right? And she has so many orders, so many requests for paintings, she cannot even accomplish, right? She can't even fulfill. So that's a simple but very obvious example. If you do something with your heart, if you do something really, really well, people will appreciate that. And people will be ready to pay you to do what you love doing. Isn't that exciting? And Srila Prabhupada was showing that example also. That he was a spiritual warrior. He loved fighting for Krishna. And he enjoyed doing that. And everything else, financially, he became successful. But then the third is Thiya. And Thiya means how to organize your activity. Basically, how to scale up what you are doing. How to organize it in such a way that you achieve very serious level of success. And then, if you're doing what you love doing, if it is appreciated by others, if it is organized, then you can advertise bhaja, right? You can talk about it. Actually, even you wouldn't have to talk about it, others will talk about it, right? And so, I was thinking that many times we are focusing on bhaja, but the other aspects are not really well taken care of, right? Oftentimes we see the upside down model. We start with bhaja we're doing very well, but then in terms of diya, in terms of being organized, it may not be so well organized, right? And then what to speak of financial feasibility, it's not there. And many times when we do something which is the right thing to do, which is a kind of a thing which must be done, but then no one's really ready to die for it. No one's really inspired to do that. Everyone is just doing that because it must be done. Then it's not really working in the long run anyway. So that's why I was thinking that it's really important for us to start from ourselves, and then everything else will follow automatically. And my strong conviction is that what's really missing in our effort to achieve the first purpose of ISKCON is what I call professional spirituality, which sounds kind of scary, right? What's that, professional spirituality? do we talk about professional priests or something like that? No. Not in any religious terms. After all, Bhagavad Gita, the most important conclusion of Bhagavad Gita is Sarva dharmam parityajya mamakam sharanam braja. Abandon all varieties of religion. So, Bhagavad Gita, if it would be a religious text, why would, in the conclusion, it would say, abandon all varieties of religion? That's a little strange. No, Bhagavad Gita is not religious, it's spiritual. And that's why Krishna was not telling Arjuna to become a priest. Actually, this is what Arjuna wanted to do, right? He wanted to forsake his profession because he was thinking it's mundane and turn into pure spirituality, renounce it all. But Krishna said, no, you should use your profession in my service. This is the thing. And I think this is what's missing in our movement. Professional spirituality. Not in any religious, but in real life terms. And this, I believe, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, I believe that this is the only way we will fulfill the first purpose of ISKCON. This is the only way how we can enter into the mainstream society by becoming spiritual professionals in so many different fields, introducing Krishna consciousness to the world in on non-sectarian terms. Because Krishna consciousness is not meant to be sectarian thing. And yesterday, some of you might know that to help the devotees, because I'm a very strong believer in investing in people, and some of the devotees know that in order to help the professional devotees, capable devotees to make an input into accomplishing the first purpose of ISKCON, we've created the Mayapur Leadership Empowerment School, and we've done the first year. And I mean, some of you might remember I did the presentation at one of the Sunday classes here when I was here last. And so many devotees were asking, so how did it go? And I would have to say that the results exceeded not only mine, but exceeded the expectations of all other faculty members, and we have quite a serious faculty members. I mean, few professional Prabhupada disciples, Krishna Kshetra Maharaj, and Pancharatna Prabhu, Anuttama Prabhu, etc. And we also had the second generation professional devotees on very high level, like Padmalochan Krishna Prabhu. He's Harvard Business Director for Southeast Asia, covering 12 countries, organizing Harvard Business school courses in those 12 countries. And anyone who is familiar with that, basically I think it's costing around $2,000 per day in tuition fees, those courses. And of course, for most of the devotees it would never be affordable, but because he is a devotee, so he came and he taught us for free. As well as many other devotees like that. Of course, we covered their expenses, airfares, but practically speaking, they were teaching it for free. And the devotees who took the course, the goal was to inspire them at the end to create social spiritual project of a noble nature, spiritual innovation, and we were pushing for that. And the idea was that the project should be done ideally in conjunction with other faith groups. So ideally this project has to be multi-faith and done in partnership with government programs, shooting for the rhino, so to say. And few devotees came up with very interesting projects they are working on right now. I was sharing with the devotees yesterday that one devotee, and it's very interesting example how to marry your professional skills and abilities with your spiritual aspirations. And so professionally he was top level manager at the construction company, but he didn't want to do that. He perceived it as a karmic work. And his aspiration was to live in devotional community, in a village, and simple living, high thinking. And I was encouraging him, since you don't want to do any job anymore, so join our school and see if you could use your profession in Krishna's service. And so after a very long struggle, he came up with the idea, if I'm good at the construction, and he is really good. He was doing multi-million-dollar projects. He's doing that for over a decade. And he said, if I'm good at the construction, if I want to live in an ideal environmental spiritual village, I should construct it myself. And we were asking him questions, and he said yes, that the state administration is looking for someone who would construct eco-village for them. And so I could take it up, and financially it's very profitable. Basically, it's very interesting that he was earning maybe $150,000 per year, but that construction would enable him to earn in maybe 5 or 6 years over $100 million. So that's quite a difference, probably 100 times the difference in terms of finances, as well as he could do, it's going to be a serious contribution.
What country is that he's from?
Canada, Ontario. He lives in Toronto. And so, but I think the most significant project, which the work has already begun, and this was also this is also one of our alumni, one young lady, and she lives in Michigan with her husband, and they run a small preaching center. But the professional couple, very innovative and interested in achieving higher levels of success in their lives. And she comes from native background, and she said that her mother is very prominent native spiritual leader, shaman in Native American tradition, and her birth was actually predicted. That devotee's birth was predicted. She was expected to be a very prominent spiritual leader. And since her childhood, her mother was telling her, you should follow in my footsteps. But then when she became 12 years old, she was really scared of the responsibility, and then she actually left home, and basically she was trying to get in Maya for a few years until she was 17, and she went to one rainbow festival, and met devotees there. And she said she immediately joined the devotees just because she recognized how similar Bhakti tradition and her own native tradition is. And we could never believe it, what she told us, that Native Americans had Mangal Aratik, Japa, Kirtan, fire sacrifices, deity worship. All the food they would eat, they were supposed to offer to the deity first, and also deity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, that thing about the Great Spirit came in later because Native Americans were embarrassed by the Christian preachers who were putting them down for worshipping the deity of the Supreme Lord. So then they glazed it over with Great Spirit, right? They were promoting more impersonal aspect, but the original tradition is personality of Godhead. And all the food was supposed to be offered to the deity before they would take it.
So they were vegetarians?
And most of the tribes, not all of the tribes, most of the tribes were actually vegetarians, most of the time. And actually in those tribes there was a rule that not a single child could take any meat until they reached the age of 10, like that. So vegetarian lifestyle was very prominent in those tribes, with the exception of few very aggressive tribes like Apache and Iroquois and others, but many tribes were actually practically vegetarian. So, and when she told us all these things, we were telling her that why don't you then do what your mother wanted you to do? Why don't you become a prominent spiritual leader? Because she has an amazing charisma. Like her, professionally she has masters in psychology and arts. She's a very good artist as well. And obviously she's a very charismatic young lady, even though she's only 25. But she's invited to so many different places. And actually we know how high the interest is in this country towards native spirituality. Actually, if some of you know the entire New Age movement, where it sprouts, what are the roots of the New Age? It's native spirituality. And actually, from what we understand, majority of Americans, they feel inclination towards native spirituality because it's in their genes that people were born in this country. So they identify with the land, and this is the culture of the land. And that's why, and another aspect is that what Prabhupada was mentioning that Native Americans were so badly treated. Actually, they went through serious genocide. As we know, horrible, horrible things were done to them, and many of them were killed. And actually their spirit was broken. Actually, all the problems Native Americans are facing in this country are only because their spiritual culture was lost. And so the whole meaning of their life was lost. And that's why they have levels of suicide and drug addictions and crime and everything else 6 times higher than average level in the country. And it's a serious problem, and the government is recognizing that problem. That's why they're pumping it a lot of money to save the native community, because most of the Americans, they do feel kind of guilt in a sense that we came in here, we killed all these people and we stolen their land, and now we're trying to enjoy it, but it was not the right thing to do. And so something should be done to kind of atone for that, right? And so there are varieties of reasons why there is such a high level of interest towards native spirituality. And the most popular movie in the history of the world, which grossed more than $2 billion, right, in the box office, was the Avatar. And I'm sure even many devotees watched the Avatar movie. How many of you watched the Avatar movie? Okay.
How many times?
Pretty much everyone. And of course, we recognize, that for us, what's prominent in the Avatar movie is kind of Vedic theme, that blue people with tilaks, etc., flying on the eagles and living in harmony with nature. But if we look even closer, we will recognize it's actually the tale of Native Americans expressed in a hidden form. Actually, this is the tale of how Native Americans underwent serious genocide and how they were abused and mistreated for the sake of taking what they had, right? And that's why this movie became so popular all over the world. And so, actually, so many people are showing interest towards Native American spirituality, and they know nothing about spiritual life at all. And so, if she would teach them Native American Bhakti, right? Teaching them Native American Japa, Native American Mangal Arati, Native American deity worship, and offering the food, so many millions of people would take it. Actually, the survey shows that 30% of American population are claiming to be spiritual but not religious. What are they referring to? Majority of them is referring to Native American spirituality. This is what they mean by saying spiritual but not religious. And if the interest is so high, they want to advance spiritually, and she could give them the opportunity for that. And those who are ready, and it would naturally happen, they would actually inquire her, what do you practice? And then she could actually tell them about Krishna and Hare Krishna mantra and everything else. So, and that's why we all encouraged her to create her own YouTube channel for Native American spirituality and teach as many people as she could about it.
Are there any Russian shamans anymore?
Russian shamans, yeah, there are. Unfortunately, that type of spirituality is not so popular in Russia. Russia has different story, that Aryan spirituality is very popular. Because Russia is much closer to India and has very, very similar culture to India. But at the moment, no matter what we say or do, the whole world is following America. Whatever's happening in this country is replicated all over the planet. And that's why Prabhupada started his movement in here. And I strongly believe that he invested so much time and energy into this country and other first world countries, because these countries are the leaders on the global scale, and we should do something to complete his effort and fulfill his desire for re-spiritualizing the whole world. And so if we have even few devotees successful on a large scale, with a large scale spiritual projects, and there are many more of these kind of projects devotees came up with, and it's very interesting that if even few of those devotees would succeed, we would see very serious change in this country and on a global scale. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Anyone has any comments?
So that lady you're talking about, she's initiated already? Or?
Yeah. She's a disciple of Japataka Maharaj. Japataka Maharaj also encouraged her to take up that mission.
So how far has she gone into this picking up? She started doing things.
That's right, yeah. She just wrote me a report. She's moving ahead. She's connecting with people. Because it won't work, it won't be so effective if she just goes on her own. But her power is the support from elders. And she has quite a few very, very prominent chiefs of the tribes who are behind her and who would speak on her behalf and endorse her to, the larger communities, etc. And, that's, otherwise just young lady, 25 years old, but she has, very serious backing.
Which tribe, can you say?
Yeah, her, basically, her lineage is from Blackfoot and Lakota, two major tribes. All right. Yes.
Will this tribal bhakti, let's say, that will it bring the followers to Krishna?
We can see that most of the devotees, before they could take up to Krishna consciousness, would actually have to have some spiritual experience before that. And it's pretty hard to understand Krishna consciousness coming from very gross materialistic background. So it has to be either family training or some prior interest to spirituality, etc. And we have to give people what they are looking for to help them advance spiritually. And because Krishna consciousness is the top spiritual science, and those people who are ready, they can automatically take up to Krishna consciousness. We are offering Krishna consciousness directly to the people, but we can see that they are not taking it up because they are not ready. And so I think it's important for the devotees to take the responsibility for spiritual upliftment of the entire population and give people what they are looking for and help them advance to the point of Krishna consciousness. It's like a spiritual elevator, right? And we have to create that kind of system which helps people to advance spiritually. Yes, they identify with themselves with the body, we can do nothing about it. So if they identify themselves with Native American spirituality, let them practice it. But if it is guided by the devotees, automatically it will bring them to Krishna, sooner or later. And that's actually how it is happening in Russia, that the biggest devotee who brings so many people to Krishna, and I think he is accountable for 90% growth of Russian community in the past 10 or 15 years. That's Audarya Dhamma, Dr. Torsunov. And so the way he does that, he's just promoting general principles of spirituality, not even mentioning Krishna, although he is strict that he is mentioning Bhagavad Gita a lot. And naturally people learn about Krishna from that, but he's not actually pushing, he's honestly not trying to convert everyone into Hare Krishnas. That's his power. That he says, you find yourself a saint in your tradition, and you accept this saint as your spiritual master, and you follow his instructions. Like that. And of course many people are saying, what kind of saints? We don't see any saints in our tradition, so what do? So they come to him, he says, okay, if you can't find any saints in your tradition, you can look in Hare Krishna tradition. Like that. But he's honestly not trying to trick people into becoming Hare Krishnas. He honestly wants them to advance spiritually according to their choice. And this is what people appreciate about him. And that's why so many people join. It's like reverse psychology, right? If I'll try to push something on you, even though it's like the best thing in the world, how many of you love cheesecake? Okay. Would you enjoy if I will catch you and push the cheesecake into your mouth? No. Okay, one person would accept it. Chaturatma Prabhu.
You have some available?
Okay, at least for first few times. But yeah, this is the reverse psychology. If we push something at people, even if it is the best thing in the world, they would protest. They would not want to take it. But if we will say, no, this is very rare, this is not for everybody, only the chosen few can have it, right? Then we know what will happen. And so I think this is his thing, right? That he says, okay, in your tradition you go and find some saint, or we don't have any saints in our tradition, so what do we do? Then so many people become devotees, but actually many people also take up to their own, they, like Prabhupada said, that we don't want to change people's religion. We want people to become serious in their religion, and then they will automatically advance spiritually. And so it's really important for those devotees who want to succeed in a serious way to understand how it works. Lately, Jayadev Prabhu, who I believe also visits here from London, he told the story how they were doing book distribution with his daughter Gaurangi, and they went to house, and then they came across one Christian old lady, and she was nearly blind, that lady, and she offered her books, and then that lady said, oh, what are these books? And she said, oh, these are spiritual books about God. And she said, oh, I believe in God, that's very good. And she had a huge picture of Jesus on her wall. And then Gaurangi Gaurangi said, "Oh, you're seriously believing in God?" And she said, "Yes, I kind of serve Lord Jesus, and He's actually telling me things to do. Like 20 years ago, he told me to quit smoking, so I had to quit smoking." And Gaurangi said, "Oh, that's very interesting." And yes, she said, 10 years ago, he told me to stop eating meat, so I had to stop eating meat. And then she gives her the book, and this lady is nearly blind, and she said, "Oh," she doesn't even see what the cover of the book is. And just by touching the book, she said, "Oh, this is about the blue boy." He showed me him also. I'll take that book. Old lady knowing nothing about Krishna consciousness whatsoever, just practicing Christianity. Right? So this is what Prabhupada was saying. If someone is sincere in their tradition, they would definitely advance spiritually. Yes?
And in Peru, similar story. One old lady, maybe 80 years old, 82 years old, came to Hare Krishna temple. He asking them, she's have vision with boy and girl swimming in the swim. They tell her, "Come to you, then you can explain who is this." So
Interesting.
So they come, they want to explain her. That's good.
Yeah.
But she's not practicing, not chanting.
It's not them, it's like Jesus Christ. She's Christian. She was practicing Christianity all her life. Yeah. And Jesus appeared. After she had the vision of blue boy and with a girl with the flower garlands with a flute.
Wow.
And swing and swing. And then Jesus Christ appeared and her also dream and vision and said, "You can go to certain people dressed like saffron. They will preach and they can explain."
Yeah, there are quite a few instances like that.
I have one story. Because my mother is a famous doctor, so she has all those famous patients. So there was one like very famous shaman woman who came, and my mother cured her. And so that lady, she wrote like a prayer for all children. We have like with 3 in a family. So she wrote one prayer for my younger brother. She said like he has to wear it like somewhere like in a pocket. Then she wrote one prayer for my sister, and then my mother said, "What about like me, like him?" And she said, "He doesn't need one. There's a blue boy behind him, and he keeps him out of all trouble."
Amazing.
It was just like a beginning of when I joined, and my mom came like shocked. She's like, "Well, your religion is real, Like, she just told me that." Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, somehow, Krishna is behind everything, and if we actually believe in it, then we will see how the Golden Age plan is developing despite of all the upheavals happening around and even inside. And it's really important for us to act in sync with the Lord's plan. And so my purpose, it's actually interesting that I've realized what Prabhupada was saying, that money is never a problem, but the biggest shortage is a good manpower. And so I'm traveling around, and my main purpose, it's like devotees been always kind to me, and they would support me financially, and because I have a little more support now, I can afford, providing scholarships for the school, etc., bearing the expenses, even though I could never believe it would be possible before, but somehow Krishna makes it possible. But the biggest need I have is, some devotees who would actually be willing to take up the training and start their own projects, take the responsibility for contributing to the first purpose of ISKCON. And we can practically guarantee that anyone who would take that training, they would never be the same again. They would actually, their life would be transformed. I can see that the alumni, they experience that themselves, and because the kind of training, rigorous training they are undergoing is very powerful. And so if you know any devotees, any professional devotees with leadership potential who would want to do something serious in their lives, who would want to create social spiritual project for themselves and the world, if you would encourage them and refer them to myself, I would be very thankful. Or of course, if you feel inspiration to become one of those spiritual leaders yourself, I'll be very happy to talk to you about enrollment in our school. Hare Krishna. So we have Radesh Prabhu, and he's a very rare guest here. Maybe we could ask him at the end to sing 5-10 minutes kirtan for the closure. Some simple melody.
I'll play Madonna.
Huh?
I'll play Madonna.
Oh, you know how to play harmonium, so go
No,
ahead.
well, it's actually not a Vedic instrument even.
Okay. Okay, then I could try to follow the harmonium.
Nama